Kia ora. So we're here for KiwiRPG Week. This is a panel about playtesting. I will be your host today. My name's Vix. Just before I introduce our panelists, or actually let them introduce themselves, just in case there's anyone here who doesn't know about KiwiRPG Week, it's a sort of a little celebration of local tabletop games that we do here in Aotearoa. We're nearing the end of it, so you've missed all of it, but a lot of stuff will be up on VODs, and we've also got some great blog posts out. And yeah, we'll talk more about that at the end of the stream, or after the stream, in fact, when we're doing the closing ceremony. So I don't have anything written down as introductions for you two, so I'll pass to Cam to introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Cam Banks. I'm a game designer, publisher, producer, and writer, and I lived in America for 22 years, and that's why I have an accent that doesn't make any sense to anybody anymore. But I am a New Zealander. I am a Kiwi. I'm here. I'm living now since 2018, and most of my stuff has been writing games that are based on other properties, licensed games, and I do those for other publishers. So the sort of shift to self-publishing has been a recent thing for me, but the testing of games for people has been constant for 20-something plus years, and it's certainly a thing I'm familiar with. So you can see most of my stuff at rustysellsword.com, and you can find me on the Blue Sky under the same handle.
And I am our other guest. I am David Easley. I also lived for over 20 years in the United States, but I was born there originally. I've been in here at Kiwi for a little over 3 years now and tend to stay for much longer than that. But my experience with playtesting, so I've been working on a variety of games recently. In the last little over a year, I've been piloting especially one of them called All According to Plan. But even before that, there's been some other things that I've been playtesting with different groups for the last few years now, just kind of getting the kinks worked out and getting different modules for existing games, mostly in the Powered by the Apocalypse space, particularly the Carved from Brindlewood space. Been writing lots of materials for that. And then additionally, of course, working on full games of my own. So, yeah.
So I'm the least American here because I've only lived there for 3 months. Before we get into it, I'm going to recommend the thing that I would recommend for every playtest, which is if you want to get the most out of this session, get a notebook out or open Notepad on your computer or something like that. I also want to say that I don't know how we'll do for time today, but we will be inviting questions from the audience. So if you've got any questions for our panelists, go ahead and fire them in chat. And I will try and keep track of that.
I'll keep an eye as well.
It helps to have one of our tech people on the panel. So to get us started, I want to start with the question, how or what things do you usually prepare for before, during, and after a playtest? So this is sort of things like maybe you have like a plan that of like exactly what you want to test today, what sort of like materials you want to give players in advance, if you've got a survey sheet afterwards, that sort of thing. Do either of you want to take this question first?
What do you think, Cam? Do you have a ready-made answer? I've got a couple of thoughts.
You've been doing it recently. I think I'll have you answer, but I will say that I think prep and planning is essential. Do not ever go into any playtest with nothing.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably unlikely to happen with people who are doing playtest runs. So, yeah. But what sort of stuff do you normally recommend doing?
Yeah. One of the things I'll mention here as well for my background is I was a software engineer by trade for well over a decade now. And my advice for testing anything is that you know what you're trying to test before you run the test, right? You know what you're looking for. So one of the things that I think about pretty extensively before even like opening up a period of playtesting is what particular part of the game that I'm developing am I interested in better understanding? Or especially which parts of the game do I think I can't understand without playtesting? Because there are some things where you can understand how certain mechanics are like balanced, mathematically, like literally balanced. But there's some things where you can't know how they will play at a table without like having a table, right? Especially things that are more socially oriented. So I think thinking in advance about what parts of the game you want to understand and what parts of the game you can only understand from playtesting, so that when you go into the playtesting and you have like a list of those things, you can tell your playtesters about it. For this playtest that I just ran before this, since it was a stream, there were other pressures for time to like make us, tell an entertaining story in the time that we had. I wish I could have prepped them more with information about the game and specific, things we're interested in learning about it. That's what I would do for normal tables. But as far as on the flip side, like on the other end of the experience, I've tried having more formal questionnaires to answer, and sometimes that's really useful if there's like one question in particular or like a handful that you're like really interested in. But otherwise, I always just try to give us like either half an hour or a full hour after the playtest, directly after, to just elicit direct feedback from the players with questions. Since I've like it's all fresh on my mind as well, I can ask them targeted questions about the playtest we just had. And I can say like, okay, in this moment, like, what did you think about how this went? I really liked how this played, or I didn't like very much how this played, or I'm interested, like, what did you understand this mechanic before using it? That sort of thing. So I find for me that's a good flow. But
I think with that approach, something that you tend to get is the stuff that's on top of people's minds is often the stuff they have the best feedback about, right?
It's what they noticed during the game. And since like writing the game is kind of about partly playing the game and like having a game for someone to play is to give them an experience that they think back on and like have memories about. But also like the game is written in order to be playable in that moment, in that series of moments that is there at the table, that hour, that the series of hours, right? So the moment by moment is freshest on the brain right after it happened, right? Because like otherwise over time the memories are going to get sorted into what's most important or what was most memorable, whatever that metric might be for that person. So yeah, getting things top of mind I find really is useful, but it also can be harder for like games that play over a longer time, or especially if you're interested in like better understanding campaign mechanics. Obviously you're not going to get those from a single session. It's not going to just be top of mind, so you need to plan for that a little bit more, I would say.
Yeah, true.
That's a rough one, I think, too. You mentioned the long-term stuff. I think my experience in the past has been very often that you'll send something to playtesters and they will give it like one or two goes. Um, it's a whole different thing to recruit people who are going to be, and we should maybe talk about how you find the people and recruit them. But in general, if you've got a playtesting group, um, that's like maybe your local group or something is a good place to sort of have that be your core. Them you can go through week after week and do this, or maybe a long weekend. But what I'm often doing is sending things out as a packet of materials and prep and things to someone in the UK or wherever, just a whole bunch of people. And my goal is to get back lots of different packets of feedback and sort of look at everything and sort of figure out what's the trend. Do various groups have hard times with this or whatever? But if you're trying to have them all test out, let's do some generational play. It's like 6 sessions, and then you'll switch to a different year, and then you'll do. I'm like, wow, that's asking a lot, and I wonder how much drop off you'll get. So I think that testing that is going to be the hardest part about it. You have to kind of be like done with the rest of it, and then now you're focusing on that and have them be open to that kind of investment. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So when you're sending packets, I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious, follow up to that. Um, do you have the information tied with that of like what you're trying to learn? Like, do you have a specific questionnaire or anything tied with the initial granting of the packet?
Yeah, I think when I would say a packet is essentially, this is part of this whole idea of what we did to prep for this, what planning. I would put together either, this is the playtest document of the rules. This is like the version of like a beta test of the rule book or whatever the heck you're doing, adventure, who knows, whatever the thing you're trying to test is. Sometimes it's only partial of a game, even because you haven't even bothered doing the rest of it. There's no character creation. You may just give them characters and say, this is a character, please pick one of these 6. That is, that's the testable material, the stuff that you can use to actually test it. And then there's the instruction stuff, which comes ancillary to that, which says, okay, so you've been chosen or selected or you've offered to try this out. So here's what the ground rules are going to be. Please don't tell anyone about this, or please do tell anyone. I mean, that's another thing. The please talk about the playtesting is a great way to get feedback. But no, it's the list of stuff that says, when you approach this test, I would like to see X, Y, and Z tried out. I would love to see feedback on the characters I provided to you. Does the base mechanic work? Questionnaire stuff. You were saying that maybe, Vex, you don't always go in for a whole thing. Or was it? I don't know. I think it's the main thing is that you don't want to leave out the stuff in them as instruction. You can't just give them a thing and say, try that, because the response will be whatever they want to give you as feedback, and it may be all over the place. So yeah, I think there's, at the very sort of least, there should be 2 things: a packet of rules and a packet of things to test, and explanation, which can sometimes be even in the email. Like if you email this out to people that have an attachment with a PDF or something, you say, attaches the document, use that, there's some characters, and here's what I want you to try and do. But I think having a sort of 2-pronged approach to that really works pretty well for most cases. But the long-term, man, that's tough.
Yeah. So tying into that, I had a playtest this morning, and I actually didn't prepare well for it because I've been so busy thinking about all the KiwiRPG stuff and also SGDQ this week. But that test is on a US server, and the test time is Friday 5 p.m. Eastern time. So it's literally just the people who are big enough nerds to want to play a game at 5 p.m. after work, which honestly, I don't think I would want to do that. So fortunately, the people I had for playtesting are other game designers, and that matter of audience does really change what kind of feedback you get back. I'm wondering if you do have any advice for finding people who are appropriate for long-term tests. Like, is that a secret or just a thing you have not cracked?
For me, I mean, often we've got enough people paying attention to the stuff that we're doing. Like when I say we, whoever I'm working with, normally the publisher has sort of a fan base or an audience or someone out there. They've got their own means of reaching by social media or blog posts or whatever, to say we have this thing that is being tested. We'd like people to try it out. Personally, I think I would sort of put the word out and say we're looking for people who fit this criteria. We're looking for people who want to try out this, I don't know, fairy romance fantasy, swashbuckling game, and it's going to be something that we would like lots of feedback, and people should play at least 3 sessions of it. So here's the contact information, shoot me as your interest, and you sort of recruit them that way. But as I was saying, I think you're more likely to get really good consistent responses from people if you've started sort of picking out a playtesting team ahead of time. If you've got one already from something you've done before, it's good to go back to that same well. You would know who they are and you'd know what kind of things they like, which is helpful. But if you're trying to get a really good broad range, then you need to sort of reach out to whoever you think your larger audience is and then sort of find them where they are. So social media, going to places like RPGNet or other places where they sort of have a notice board sort of style thing, various discords that have notice board stuff as well. I think anywhere where you think you can go find people who would probably want to play your game, go there and make sure you have like your spiel. Like you should have something like maybe 2 paragraphs at the most, which says, here's what I'm trying to do. And at the very least, if you get all these emails from people saying, yeah, I love fairy swashbuckling, it's my favorite kind of novels, but I've never tried games before. You're like, well, okay, do I want someone who hasn't tried any RPGs? Is that a useful kind of audience that I want to try out? Or is that not going to work? And if it's not going to work, you can field test it.
It's kind of like, do I want that as a demographic in the market I'm working towards, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say absolutely you do. If you can convert people who love reading, Court of Thorns and Roses or whatever into gaming, then do it.
Yeah.
But that's a hurdle. Maybe you don't think your game is going to be across necessarily. And if it doesn't, then you've got some feedback right there. I gave you a box of tools and things to play with, and you said, what? So I should work on that.
David, I know you've been doing a lot of contests for your games. Do you find that's a good group to playtest with?
Ooh, I think so. I think particularly for games where... so in the case of this one, it's very much aimed at a single session. If you're playing multiple sessions of it, it's just to get more of the game. It's not to like tell a continuing story, right? So games that are built to satisfy that faster paced environment, I find are great for cons. If you are playing a game that often does not play through a single main storyline in a single session, not as good of a candidate, I would say, for a contest of courts. I think the nice thing about con goers who are willing to, you give a pitch for what the game is, right? And oftentimes, if you include in that pitch that it is a playtest, they know that going in. And the kinds of people who are going to cons are really excited about gaming, usually. And the kinds of people who would pick your game out of that sea of games, is keen on it, right? And especially again, if you're looking for specific targeted feedback, it can be useful to already have a kind of curated group that you're working through. But if you just you have a new thing, you want to know how it plays, how it feels to an average player who might just be a little bit more keen or a little bit more experienced than a truly random person, right? I think cons are great for that sort of testing.
Yeah, and having been to cons, sometimes you end up in the situation where you're like, I don't know what game I want to go to, and you just end up at one.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to discover a game maybe is for you as well.
Yeah. I never knew I wanted fairy swashbuckling until I sat down and played it at the convention I went to last week. I've been to I got a Convergence in Hamilton each year, and that's a good place to test out games too, because while there are also lots of tables of people running games that everyone wants to play because it's popular and it's already out there and published, it's an awesome venue to try out things and sort of say, I'm running this game, here's what it is. Same thing, the same kind of spiel you have before, but it's now a thing that someone else is handling all the logistics of it. You just show up at your table and there's people there, right? Which is
no scheduling issues.
Yeah. Actually, that reveals, I think, the other nice thing about contests, which is they're very low cost to you as far as setting up and getting them arranged and all that stuff. You get to do all the simplest things, which is just having your materials ready. Mm-hmm. And then the con does all the hard things of getting people into your game, to come and play it, and arranging, finding the interest, hopefully, getting people allocated, having a space set up. Those are all the logistic stuffs that makes playtesting a little bit more complicated sometimes. And so if they can handle all that stuff and you can just have a table, then if it isn't the most valuable table as far as helping you refine and create the game that you're trying to make, it still was pretty cheap for you from a effort standpoint to get that table together. So it's not as big of a loss as sometimes you can really work hard to get a particular group to play, and then they don't have any useful feedback, and it's okay, yeah. Well, yeah, that was kind of bust.
Yeah. I might throw you this question. What kind of feedback do you value most? This feels like we're heading into that territory.
For me, my answer to that is so guided by what I'm working on, because there are some, like there's some parts of the cycle where what I'm most interested in is like first blush, like emotional impact. Like, does a table hear about the game? Are they excited? Do they get through the introductory bit and are they excited? Do they like grasp the details quickly enough that they can pick it up and play? Like, when those are the kinds of things that I want, then that's like what I'm going for. But like, that's not, sometimes you like, there's a specific fiddly mechanic that rarely comes up that you have to engineer to happen so you can make sure that it works like you intend, or it doesn't. And like, that's a different energy you bring to a table, I guess, or that you ask somebody else to bring to their table.
I think that's a really interesting point too, because one thing I feel that we kind of often forget is that RPGs, we sort of like, people expect them to be a story from start to finish, right? We're going to play a session, it's going to be like an adventure, or it's going to be a scenario, or something else will be there, and there'll be an intro, there'll be some cool stuff, we'll try some rules out, and then there'll be an ending. Your playtesting may not have that same structure. You may just say, we're going to playtest this thing. It's the tail end of combat. I want to know how combat works at the end of some time. So these characters have been pre-damaged for you, and I'm not going to give you any story about why you're there. We don't care. The when you do that kind of stuff, which is like very direct playtest stuff, like saying we're going to try out the rules for falling over and over again. So just fall and roll some damage. You may even have a list of, here's the different sub rules I'm testing out for this session of things, and you have no story. People often balk at that because they're like, well, no, it's not RPGs. I gotta feel in the moment. I gotta be immersed in my character. I have to know what it is like. Who am I that's falling and taking damage? Who is this person? Like, we don't care. It doesn't matter. We're testing falling. But on the flip side of that, sometimes the things that you're trying to do, which is sort of miniature versions of them, they do need that context, because otherwise that's the point of you having them in there. So if you want to do end of combat, give them at least something to set them up and say, okay, so your characters have fought your way to the throne room, and you've gone through all kinds of stuff, and it's been quite a lot of ordeal. You're all about half your normal strength. I want to test out what it's like having these sorts of resources where you can recover and get back or fight to the end. So assume you've done that. I've written up a short blurb for each of you. It says what cool things you did, but you can embellish. I don't care. It's not really that important, but please do. Then let's start the game at round 9. And I think that kind of thing helps people get into that mindset, because if you just treat it like it's a mechanical stress test, your players will sort of not engage. And I think you can't really separate that engagement element without getting good feedback, without losing the good feedback you probably will get. Any thoughts on that? I don't know whether it's something you tried.
I think for me, you just kind of crystallized when to do a playtest at all versus not. Because like, if it comes down to maths, get a spreadsheet, get good at Excel, like and like run your numbers and do your simulations and figure things out that way. I think for me, when it's time to bring it to a table at all, and I do love the idea of doing like excerpts. That's something where for the current one that doesn't make that much sense to do, but for another game we've got kicking, that would be a much nicer thing, because it's more discrete mechanics. Like, everything's not quite as connected. So being able to like batch but give people the context, I think is really, really good. I think also, if you can't just solve the maths in your spreadsheet, if you need to bring it to a table to understand how certain mechanics like socially interact, or what the attitudes are about them, like, so it's not just the maths at the end of the day. Like, it's what the consequences of those are, what people feel about them, all that stuff.
It's vibes, right? It's all about
vibes. It's vibes. Like, this is a little bit of a deviation, but one of the things that I think about a lot before even starting a project is, can I pitch this project in such a way that somebody that my target audience is immediately excited about it enough to drop whatever else they're doing? If I can't do that, it's probably not worth writing, because like again, there's lots of reasons to write. If you're thinking from a commercial perspective, it might not be worth writing, because we're in a really contested environment. There's lots of options. We're entering an age of plenty as far as a lot of this is concerned. And so you're not just writing a cool game. You're writing a cool game that is competing with every other cool game.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you need to know who your audience is, and you need to like make sure your idea is it rattles their bones. Like for the right player, it's not just like good. It's like, oh, I didn't even realize I was waiting for this game my whole life.
Yeah.
Right. So like I don't know, that's a digression, but it's something that reminded me of.
Yeah, a lot of those cool games as well are like you've seen a cool series on TV and you want to remake that series, which unfortunately means that that game in particular is up against the 7 other games where someone's seen that series and been like, I'll make that in this system. Which is a very unfortunate sort of landscape we have in the indie TTRPG scene at the moment. And I try to steer away from that sort of thing and make stuff that's very much not heavily based on existing properties. But there is a lot of value to that as well, because you are getting stuff that like people have put a lot of very good thought into, like what makes this setting good, and you just get that for free.
Yeah,
it's worth it.
I mean, that's the majority of my work in the past has been working on games where like I worked on Marvel Comics and Firefly and other shows and things. And the thing about that is that you already have that built-in setting and fan base and everything that goes with it. But you also have incredibly high expectations from people who kind of like, well, imagine trying to sort of like start over from scratch with Star Wars as an RPG, right? If you didn't have any of the previous 3 or 4 or 5, 6 different versions of it, you said, I want to do Star Wars and I want to do this. Your players are going to be saying, well, I have in my head what my platonic ideal of a Star Wars game is just from you telling me a tabletop RPG based on Star Wars. They're going to say Star Wars, everything I know about it, RPGs, everything I know about that, plus together equals what I think is going to happen at the table. And you come up to them and say, this is great. It's going to have cards and we'll talk about our feelings. And everyone's like, oh, no, that's not what I thought it was going to be. Then you start getting that sort of dissonance. And so I think that you kind of have to sort of realize if you're doing it like it's going to be based on X or it's inspired by Y, that comes with a whole lot of stuff that will already be either a great inroad for you people to sort of get them, but it may also create some problems for you to communicate across what your game's doing, right? Because there's going to be that pre-built baggage of the license.
And that feeds back to our question about what feedback is valuable, because sometimes what you get with that is that like you get a particular person's opinion that's very opinionated about this IP that you're working with. And that person may not, reflect other people's already strongly opinionated opinions about this IP.
Yeah.
So it's not like you definitely get a clear idea of how an audience is going to, take your new work. Whereas I think you run that risk a lot less if you're bringing something that's very new to people, right?
Even if it's genre based, like you're doing heist stuff, right, David? And I think that everyone kind of knows what a heist is or a caper or something like that. There's a certain degree of like expectation built into that. It's going to be a little bit like Ocean's 11 or whatever the heck. I mean, there's quite a variety of that. But if you said like we did Leverage, which is very much heists, but that's based on a TV show and it's about you are all basically criminals trying to do good and take down bad guy corporations and evil people who just suck. There's already like a narrower version of it that you had to try and address. I think if you come at it from a genre or a style or a vibe, you're going to have a pretty good, place to work in. But you are also not likely to get that kind of like messed up baggage that comes with it. I think that's often a huge problem for testing it. I think you were saying, the expectations instead of telling what questions you want to answer. I joked earlier off before the panel that a lot of the time what I get is people offering their opinions about what game system the game should be using as opposed to the one that they've been given in the playtest, because they'll say things like, "I haven't played a lot of my group mostly plays D&D, so have you thought about just doing a reskin of D&D for this, because we would probably play that." And you're like, no, I can't because of reasons. 2, I don't really want to do it that way. And 3, I think it would be better if it was this mechanic I'm using. And also, I didn't ask that.
Yeah, that's the key point there.
The last
I
one
can
is the
get
most
feedback on
important.
this one thing, and you're telling me something that's not feedback related to this one thing.
I feel like, I even had one person say, we all love GURPS because it's a universal game and there's no setting it can't do, so just do this in GURPS. And I didn't want to argue. I just said, no, it's not what we're looking for. Thanks for your opinion. It's fine. But it's all really important. That stuff is also true when people ask you sort of esoteric questions about the license, which maybe even the license doesn't answer in the series or TV or books or whatever. They'll say, who is the strongest? Is it Hulk or Thor? Will your game tell me? And I'm like, the comic people haven't said so. So, it's whatever the writer wants. And then they're like, oh,
It-
that's not good. This game.
Yeah, it's more often the comic people have said so, except like a lot of different ones have said different things.
Yeah.
Which is why the whole MCU thing is such a mess.
So
You can't expect consistency across hundreds of different writers.
It's a problem. It's a problem. And you're just one designer making a game that you think is the best expression of it. So you're hoping that the answer will be, or you'll find out by playing it. Try that, and that's not.
We're not looking for the answer to questions like that to be mechanical in the first place. We want to create the experience that people can have where they can answer those questions.
Mm-hmm.
A follow-up to that then. So knowing that there's going to be some percentage of people who playtest your game, even if you're trying to keep kind of a tighter pool, there's going to be some people who don't get it for one reason or another.
Yeah.
There's some things you can probably do in the setup to help make that a little bit better for you. We've talked a little bit about that already. The question I kind of was thinking about from this is handling those responses. Obviously, some of them are like, all right, you're out of your gourd. Like this is like not relevant to what I'm doing and what I'm working on. You just don't get it. But is it a quantity thing, or is it a certain perspectives or voices? Like, how do you start to hear some of that feedback as like, oh, this is maybe something that I should think about? Not necessarily their specific solution, which is like use GURPS, but maybe like, oh, enough people are talking about it this way. Maybe there is something I need to change about how I'm communicating, or like, what's the threshold there? Like, or how do you find that threshold?
That's really actually super helpful feedback. And it may seem, one of the things you should probably, when you're doing playtesting, have a bit of a thick skin about your work and accept that people aren't always going to like it. But if you have consistent, like let's say you have 10 groups, you're lucky, you've got 10 groups out there who are trying your game out, and you've told them, you got from June till July to play this, we want at least 3 sessions of play, give us your game reports, your feedback on these different things. How are the characters? How was this? You're trying to be a little bit more generic and get some feedback. And then 7 of the 10 groups come back and says, we couldn't make it through the first session because we couldn't figure out the rules for this and this and this, and it was just too dense, or we didn't get it. So we house ruled it, or we did this. So you're looking there and you think, okay, that's a really good set of feedback, because right off the bat, your product that you've given them, this sort of packet, isn't up to the standards for what you want to test with. No one can understand it, right? It's useful to know why or how they didn't, what part didn't make sense, If they said, well, I don't get game language, then that's obviously another thing. But when people come back and say, we tried to do this scenario and it didn't make any sense, we couldn't get the rules to work, we weren't sure about the outcome of the dice, or we couldn't figure out what these skills meant. All of those things should be looked at by you as things to revision or iterate, right? If your response to 7 people out of 10 saying that is, well, they weren't my player type audience anyway, then you should probably stop. I think even if it's like 2 out of 10 come back with a thing that you should look at, and the others didn't mention it, they may not have mentioned it because it either didn't come up in their game or they just sort of glossed over it or didn't worry. But someone was cared enough to make a note about it and send it to you. So maybe look at that and give it some consideration, because I think anything that you get as feedback from people, unless it's, like you said, wildly strange, deserves some thought about, okay, so does this actually prevent the game from working, or is this sort of the way I've written it maybe isn't communicating, or does this person just simply not like rules like that? So that's the thing to sort of look at. I think you can't be precious about your work. You should have a bit of a thick skin, and you should sort of listen to people when they give you feedback, because it often is telling you things you may not have thought about.
Yeah, we had a thing a while ago where a lot of people would say, it was something like, you should always accept constructive feedback, even if it's negative. And I've always felt that that's not very good advice, because you should always accept all feedback, even if it's negative and not constructive, because that's like, it's not up to other people to pass that information for you and make it useful.
Yeah.
If they just give you feedback that's like, I hate you as a person, that's still a data point that you have. You now know that there's a person who hates you. Maybe you can infer from that, like, this is a type of person who hates me, maybe. Like, maybe it's consistent among that type of people, you know?
I wouldn't dwell too long on the person who says they hate you in response to playtest feedback, but yes.
Maybe not.
I think that you're right. I mean, also, these folks, there aren't that many professional playtesters, right? That's not really a big thing. So I think these are just gamers or people who are interested in trying.
If there is a professional playtester, I'm not sure I want them.
Well, yes. I mean, how much of a jerk are they, right?
Well, I was just thinking, like, I'm not trying to make a game for playtesters, I guess. Like, that's kind of like where my head's at. Like, I'm trying to make a game for average, tabletop enjoyers.
Yeah. I think my point is that not everyone's equipped with the even the language to sort of frame how they don't like it, right? So to your point, if you say, I just didn't like it, didn't work, you could have follow-up questions for them, right? You might say, is there something about the setting or the characters or the rules? If they come out flat and say, we tried this, we all expected it to be this, and it was not, then that's good feedback, but maybe there's not much you can do about that.
Yeah, if you've got the initial feedback, you can point them in a direction to try and get more information. But if you dismiss that initial feedback, then all that information's gone to you immediately.
Yeah. No, it's very, very true. Wow, I'm just trying. I'm having flashbacks to some of these things that we used to get back, and some of the responses. Sometimes you really have to just like accept that people may not like the things that you've got in the game, and if you have to sort of figure out why that's a problem, it can get kind of tricky, right? Because there was an adage that someone, I think it was Jeff Tidball, when I was working at Atlas Games, had this thing. He said that if you find out what people hate about your game, right? Find out people who don't like your game, find out why they don't like the thing, and do more of that. And it was like, well, that seems counterintuitive. And it's like, no, actually, if the people just flat out don't like your game anyway, find out why they don't like it and then do more of that. So long as other people do like it, if you've got different groups, it means that there's something about the game that is, keeping them out. It's okay. Double down on the things that people do like and also the things that they don't, because you'll create your audience that way in some fashion. And that's a weird thing to try and psychologically prepare yourself for. Like, okay, well,
strange advice, but also good advice.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I think along those lines, or rather a specific concrete example I have of that is for this game that I'm currently working on, because of the timeline of it, because we're trying to get through a whole like heist film in a single 3 to 4 hour session. And specifically, there's all sorts of things in place in the game to make sure that there are no, we'll call them, there's no positive surprises. There's, to me, the best part of a good heist movie is how every detail connects and like is paid off in some way, whether that be in big ways or small ways or everything in between. And one of my problems with a lot of heist game implementations is they handle that sort of, but like not entirely. And there's like different complaints I have about some of the way other games do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be making this, right? But a concrete example of what you're talking about. Actually, remind me really quick what we were talking about in that preamble. I lost my thought. We were talking about
finding out what people don't like. And
yes,
doing more
thank
of
you.
Yeah. No, I've been where you are.
Yeah. I got to the
It's
clip and I
hard to keep
realized
track of
I couldn't remember where to
conversations.
jump. So there's a part of the game, because of that structure, it tends to be more like narrative writer's room level and less like in scene, because we don't have as much time to stick around in scene because we need to start painting into the next thing to make it build. And in early drafts, it was much more confusing about that fact, because I didn't know that was something that like was emerging as how the game needed to be structured in order to accomplish kind of the goals I originally set out for.
Right.
And some of the early feedback was like, I thought I was going to be role playing more. Like I thought I was going to be like having more like in-person conversations, like in scene and game. And I'm like, oh, well, like if that's not going to be as strong of a dimension of the game, then like our options is either fix that problem, because like that seems to be what people are looking for, or don't fix that problem and lean into the negative space there a little bit more and frame this game as what it kind of needs to be more. And so that's like the direction I'm pushing it right now, but still doing a bit of steering in that direction.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, but I was basically posting that feedback on that last game we just streamed.
This is my problem sometimes with the Forged in the Dark games, like Blades in the Dark and so on, because those games that have very clear sort of structural things that happen, and I read through the book and I sort of maybe try to see how people are running it and so on, and a lot of what I bounce off of is like, oh, it's not meant to be a lot of, I'm not going to go into the RP or anything, just do it, then find out and do this, and there'll be short snippets of whatever. And part of me wants to sort of like, no, I want the whole, what am I doing? What's going on? Oh, we don't care. And now you're back in town and you've got your money and I'm like, but I have like 7 skills on my sheet that are all for that. What else am I for if it isn't for that? Don't worry about that. That's just to help you get the right numbers that we have for your, income and so that kind of stuff kind of is weird, because on some level, what John Harper's done is he's sort of cut away some of the chaff and say, we don't need all that stuff. You're in there. Your establishment role is to get you into this place, and then you do your little bits, and then we can have a bit of this, and then we're going to jump out, right? Cut scenes, leave out. There are people for whom that is just hard to even figure out. Like you were saying, I thought there would be more role playing. Well, where is the role playing in your role playing game? Like, where does it live? Right? It's somewhere. Otherwise, it isn't a role playing game. It's a simulation of something. But if you don't have that place in there somehow that maybe is organic or comes out of play and just is going to happen, you maybe have to sort of decide what that's going to be if all the feedback comes back like that, right? So, yeah, thousands of people love that game and play it all the time, and I'm like, no, my brain doesn't work. So it isn't the game, it's me. But I think that's kind of where you're getting at. I think it's sort of there's certainly a place where if a lot of people just have so much fun doing it and some don't, you don't have to make it work for the people who don't.
Yeah.
Right? End of the day, that's okay.
I think that's the critical distinction is when you're getting some feedback that people hate a particular part, and you're getting other feedback that people love a particular part, and it's the same part, then like your choice becomes, okay, do I cut this for the group that likes it this way, or do I lean into this for the group that likes it this way?
Yeah.
And this is like a good way during playtesting to identify those choices that you have to make as the designer, and then like determine which one of those paths more closely aligns with your vision for how the game should work.
Yeah, and part of what I try to consider the most when I'm doing playtesting is that what I'm testing is not a game, but the experience I'm trying to make a game to create, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you make a game that runs the way your game's supposed to run, but what you find is the separate components cause like they have jarring transitions, and then the game's what you expect it to be, but you talk to the playtesters afterwards and they're like, I didn't really feel like it was working right because it's not flowing correctly through these different parts. And so I think that focus on experience rather than game is just a thing you should always keep in mind when you're preparing for a playtest.
My follow-up to that is, how do you sacrifice your darlings? Like when you realize
Cam,
there are mechanics you have that are beautiful and you love them and you perfected them, and then you realize they don't fit in the game you're making.
I have a great story. I want to share this anecdote. When we were working on Smallville RPG back in 2010, it's a game about the TV show with Clark Kent and everybody. So that's fine. Initial versions of that game, you had a character with you had attributes, you had skills, you had values, which is what your character sort of believed, like power and glory, and how much of those you sort of had investment in. You had relationships with different other characters. You had traits and other things. You had this like whole list of things. And we were trying it out and trying to figure this out. And then through several versions of playtesting, we realized that the attributes and skills were not the interesting part of the character. Like they weren't that interesting. They weren't doing anything. They weren't holding any weight. They were in fact weighing things down. So, and it wasn't me or Miriam who thought this, but it was like our editor and layout. Because we all had like this sort of chat. We were all talking about it all the time. So people's roles were very much, intermingled. And Amanda and Tiara said, like, let's just chop those out. Let's not have those in your character sheet. I'm like, what are you talking about? You can't have a character with no stats. It's stupid. So we said, okay, we'll try it. So we said, okay, here's the character. He's got values and he's got relationships. And what do I believe and what do I think of other people? And my powers and things are down there too. But those are my two things. Every role was your value and your relationship with someone, right? Because it was TV and it was always like me having a fight with Lex Luthor or you having an argument with this person. And we did that. We tried it out and it worked amazingly. And we said, what? And there's no way that we would have come to that from the very beginning. We would not have done it. We had to get rid of this thing which we thought was an essential part of RPGs, in fact. And it wasn't until we did that the rest of the game started to unfold and become the thing that it did. And to this day, I look back and think that was such an amazing decision to make, such a valuable thing to do. And it only happened because we were willing to sort of cut some stuff free. You cannot go into your final version without having shot some stuff very clearly out in the street and stripped out anything which doesn't work. The whole thing of the blind man carving an elephant, or I think the story is like there's a sculptor and he starts out with a big block of marble, and someone says, "How do you know how to make an elephant out of that?" And he says, "I just cut all the pieces that aren't an elephant off of it, and then I'm left with the elephant." And in many ways, game design's like that. You're sort of like orbiting this thing which will be the experience that you want in the end, but on the way you got to chop things off. Things have to go, jettison that rule. That thing doesn't matter until you finally have this thing, and it may feel weird, but if it does what it wants to do, if everyone's having this elephant, then you've done it, right? And I think at the end of the day, we had done that. We had basically just take the wings off the elephant and the roller skates and everything. That doesn't matter. We don't need that. We just want this sort of WB TV show RPG, which just has this, and it worked really great. But I don't know. It's painful. It's a painful experience to do that sometimes.
I think there's something else that we can add to that is not only is it important to sacrifice your darlings when that feedback comes up and it's like there is a thing that needs to be cut even if you love it. I think a mistake that a lot of people make is that they don't sacrifice other people's darlings at the start of their work. Because you see a lot of new game systems that are very beholden to the game systems that person has played, and they believe that you need a specific stat block. Like, not every game needs 6 stats that are 3 letters and have modifiers for your dice rolls.
I get so
There's
tired
so
of
much cultural hangover for stuff like that just keeps creeping into new games.
There's a sort of running theory that often designers do that, and they sort of default to what they kind of consider to be the vanilla version of some sort of rules, like going towards D&D in some way, because there's the hope that people will adopt your game faster if they have familiar territory to walk in. So you may find, oh, this is amazing, this is a cool new game, it looks colorful and fantastic. You turn to the back, look at the character sheet, and it's just a 5e sheet with some changes on it. Your initial response might be, oh. But I mean, like, they want the game to be immediately adoptable by people who come from 5e, and that's what they don't want to think about that part for their design. They want to tell you about the cool world that they've made and the characteristics. My spells are different and whatever. And so they haven't even worried too much about the play experience being anything different from a very traditional 5e approach. But the reverse can be the problem, because if you come up with something completely, utterly different when no one has anything to grab onto, right? Which we were worried about with Smallville because there's no stats, but people kind of figured it out. The problem is if you change everything to the point where nothing is familiar, then your game will be really impenetrable to some people to come into. They'll have to unlearn how to play, right? If they've never experienced anything like it. Have you had that sort of experience yourself, trying new things out in the RPG space and thought this is being too clever?
I had to teach a bunch of people how roulette worked.
Right.
So speaking of killing darlings, for the first 3 drafts, I think, of All According to Plan, how pledges, which are a mechanic, and conditions, which are now gone, but at the time were a mechanic, were doled out, was like betting on roulette, which was like into the whole like heist stuff, like casino sort of vibes, and people loved it, except it just didn't belong in the game. But
it's so tonally fun for the game, but also so pointless.
Yeah, exactly. It didn't mesh. But as far as like nobody knew, like I'd like explained the betting board for roulette, and like it was a stripped down, pared down one. It didn't have like all the options, and we were only betting in a few of the different ways that you can bet on roulette. I know way too much about roulette now. But if you get like, there's a spectrum there where if you get like a little bit to the right of a known like way that the game can operate, then people, it's just different enough that it's actually like even harder to get, because they keep trying to do the thing that they know, and it's like, no, well actually it's like that, but like it's a little bit, it's a little that a little bit different is actually kind of maybe the worst kind of different. When you shift like all the way to right field, people are like, I have no idea how roulette works, teach me. Because it's like they have nothing to compare it to, right? So as a mechanic, it worked. For the game, it did not work, which is a different problem, right?
I actually had the same experience with my first playtest with KiwiRPG folks. We had a day when a bunch of people met up and we tried some different things. And I tested the combat mechanics for Our Father's Land, which are blackjack based, but Our Father's Land is a system where essentially the last act is about these people dying. So the combat gets progressively harder, and the way you do that with a blackjack-based system is you make a lot of like modifiers that end up making it so that, for instance, maybe if you go over 20, then you bust or something like that, right? we had one person who was like a pro at blackjack for some reason I don't remember.
No.
But basically, even the people who didn't really know much about blackjack were like, "Oh, I know that blackjack is a game where you hit up to 17 and then you stay." And it's like that changes as the game we're playing progresses, but people didn't really get that vibe.
I've worked in the past on games that use like tarot cards and stuff, and I think a lot of time is my initial retrospective of that kind of thing is that was just me trying to figure out what to do with some tarot cards and make a game about it. It didn't need those things. There wasn't anything about them that was that compelling. But the problem is that you start thinking, okay, this mechanic's got this thing about it. Okay, so tarot cards have major arcana and they've got minor arcana that made from 1 to 10. There's also pages, and you see that starts influencing what you do with your game to the point where your game shifts to do something else because you start trying so hard to shoehorn some clever thing into it. And at the end, people go, well, I don't know, it didn't feel like that thing you're trying to do, but it was fun. I guess it was cool. You're like, that didn't work. I was being too clever, and that's where I think a lot of people find out in playtesting, almost like too late. Okay, this is like a 6th playtest. The whole time the roulette wheel should not have been in here, and you're like, I gotta go back to the drawing board. That can feel like a huge step backwards, right? But actually, it's freeing you from the thing that's weighing your success down. So ultimately good. But
the thing about killing your darlings is when you realize that you need to kill them, it's so much better when they're dead. Like, not to like lean it a little bit too hard into this metaphor, but like
right.
that I think is the thing, and maybe that's something that I should like to tell my past and future self and remind my future self that like when you realize that you've been locked into something that you really like, it's just wrong or bad. And stripping it out makes you feel like, oh, well, now what am I going to do? Because I don't have my darling anymore. Like, I don't know what is the thing now. It is really freeing once you get over the hurdle of it not being what you remember it being, and you instead start figuring out what it should be.
It's good to interrogate why you had it there in the first place, which is true for all games and rules in them. Why does this game have hit points? It's not a combat game. Why does it have hit points in it? Is it because you just think that people should have an arbitrary number of health points somehow? That becomes an issue, I think, too, because there's also the angle of like, on one level, the people sort of like say, I want to embody a character in this game. I'm playing a character. I'm going to be like a detective, or I'm going to be a, firefighter or something, or a sword master. My character sheet should tell me everything about that, and that's how it should work. And it should give me everything I need to know, and then I should define everything, and I should know exactly what I can do and can't do. And if your game doesn't cover everything on its sheet, like I was saying before with the Smallville thing, but if it doesn't cover it, people start wondering what that is, and then you have they don't even get to your game. Like they haven't even got to the game part. They're looking at your things that I don't. What does all this mean? Where's my hit points? What's that? You may have all kinds of cool systems ready for them to try out and play, but if they haven't gotten that part, then they're already sort of working at a deficit. So I think that kind of lives in the same space of the pieces not fitting together, like you said earlier, Vex, where you've got this, this thing works really well, and this works really well, but you're never going to meet because there's no hit points in there,
Yeah. Do we want another question?
Yeah.
There's
problem
so
is
many
I
things
feel like
I've written in here that I'm
if
trying
I
to
keep
keep track of
asking
things we've covered.
follow-ups, we're just gonna keep drilling deeper into single topics. I wanted to
we will
leave space for where you want to take us.
What's something wildly different, Vic, so we can talk about?
What about when you're having playtests, do you prefer to run them yourself or have a tester run them, as in the GM role or whatever equivalent you might have?
Well, you can't sell yourself with the game, so at some point someone's going to have to try it out in your place, right?
That's a good way of putting it.
Unless there's something that we aren't being aware of. Every game comes with David. You're like, oh, that's great. How does that happen? I think it's good to try. You should be running the game yourself for sure, trying it out and testing it, so you can instantly on the make notes and that sort of thing. But other people have to run it and be able to run it as well as you, or instead of you. So I think that's pretty much a given, right?
Yeah, I think with what we were talking about before, a lot of the time when people are like, oh, I'll take out all these mechanics and I'll put in all my stuff, quite often they put in just as much stuff. And the reason why people can't pick up this new game is there's so much cognitive overhead. And when you're trying to figure out whether other people can run a game, you have to put in that serious consideration to like how much cognitive overhead is actually here. Because if your game already has way too much for one person to pick up and you give that to a group and say you go playtest on your own now, the only feedback you'll get from that group is we couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
And that tells you one useful thing, but that's the only useful thing you get from it.
Yeah. Also, you can't just assume they have the same sort of understanding and knowledge and past experience that you had. You have to somehow put it in there if you want them to be able to do it, right? So to replicate the experience you want, which you can maybe get yourself, you can't have any shortcuts. You can't sort of say, when this is being run, figure out the bit like I do. I always figure out this bit. Well, no, you have to say what that is. You can't just leave it out, right? So the GM's instructions and their role and the things that they can and can't do and the specific mechanics that are there and the guidance you need, that should go into the product that you're giving them to test if you want them to run it themselves. Because otherwise they'll just run it like they've run everything else, right? And that may be part of why you get that dissonance.
Yeah.
I think for me, there's a stage in game development where enough of it is on the page that somebody else can do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
But up until that point is hit, like it lives inside of here too much for other people to be able to run it yet. Like all according to plan, we're like teetering on that edge where I almost actually the last draft, if that had been the final version of the game, I would have started giving it out, or the final-ish version of the game, I would have started giving it out to people to run for me. But I found enough stuff in that playtest, like, okay, well now I have to go back to the drawing board. So like until it gets to a point where I stop getting, I need to change this in playtests I run, for me it's most efficient to just run it and iterate it, and because then I have the first person experience, I can understand what needs to change as fast as it does. So then we're at the place right now where so after this playtest earlier, I'm really happy with how the stuff I changed in the middle works, but I'm now realizing that there's been this niggling doubt in the back of my mind that modus operandi, which are your people's MOs, are working the way that they should and not how I originally wrote them, which is a different thing, right? They're working the way I wrote them, but I'm starting to doubt that's actually how it should work. There might be another thing I need to do there to make that work more like I want it to, more like the game needs. And so I'm going to think about that for a little while, see if I need to change that, and then playtest it again. And then assuming all that's good, everything else now has been written and it's ready to give to somebody else and say, hey, go play this and let me know what I didn't tell you. Because there's definitely going to be things that I miss, again, because it's lived up here for so long.
Yeah.
But it's at the stage now where we're nearly ready to give it out to other people to see what they can do with it.
I've been designing a game on my Patreon, and so the patrons have been seeing me develop them over time. And I just put up the sort of quick start thing for it. This game is Gyro Shooter, and it's sort of based on hero shooter games, video games like Overwatch and games like that. But the fun thing is that I've already gotten some feedback, which is, you don't have a rule for this, or you didn't explain this. I'm like, oh crap, I've just been having it as part of my assumption of things, and I didn't spell it out, and that's really important. So right off the bat, there's, I've set this thing, a scenario and some characters, and here's what you do. And they're like, you mentioned this, but never say what it does. And it's not even like a part of the game that I didn't care about testing because it's not relevant. It's clearly a part of the game, but I left it out of the instructional stuff. So that's super useful. But at some point, you do have to have people try it, and they will come back and give you the feedback saying, "I couldn't, run this because you didn't tell me about, how do you make combats work or whatever." But I also think there's something about the idea that you're going to quickly figure out what your own biases are, because you may think that things work a certain way and it makes sense to work that way, and other people try it and they just can't wrap their heads around that particular kind of angle. And I think the GM is someone specifically in the game that you really want to make sure they understand how everything works, because they're advocates for it when they run it for people, right? Kind of your ambassador out in the world.
I think what we've stumbled onto here is sort of like there is a 3-step pipeline you can go through with playtesting, where initially you're running it yourself because no one else is capable of running it, and hopefully you be able to move on from that eventually to having one of your playtesters who's played it before run it for you, or run it for whoever. But like that's still not enough. You need that end step of strangers can pick this up and run it on their own, right?
Yeah.
That actually, you've identified for me as an indie developer without like an established fan base necessarily for anything specifically that I'm making. My eternal strategy to finding playtesters for my games is I like start to build community with other people who run things, other keepers, GMs, etc., and get them. Especially, there's a lot of GMs. This isn't me. I love to run things. I'm always would prefer to run than to play. I like to play, but it's not what I'm aiming for, right? I really love to run games. But there's a lot of GMs who run games kind of as a consequence of wanting to play games. And like that seems to be, from, if I were to do like the numbers above it, it feels like maybe 80% of GMs, something around there, 4 and 5, seem to like love playing and run mostly because like they need more people who run games. And so like, okay, well, if I'm going to have a game, I got to run something, right?
Yeah.
So that pool is just like perfect fodder to have come do playtests for you, because they want to play in games. They want to play in games where maybe they don't have a super long commitment because they already have some like long-term campaigns they're doing, and yada yada. So for like shorter tests, they're great. And then now you have people who can run games, who have now played your game, and maybe are excited about what you're working on, and you can give them new stuff. Like, okay, well, you go now you go and run this, right? And so you can kind of build your own pipeline of playtesters through recruiting from GMs, from keepers.
Yeah, and it's also, if you're indie, it's honestly a pretty good sales strategy, because if you have people following you, they'll pick up your games because they're like, oh, this cool person makes these cool games. I like that. I'm going to go support them. But they won't play those games. But the people who you take into playtesting and you show them how to play this game, they'll go and play that game with someone else and convince them to buy it.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of. I mean, this is the idea of the alpha gamer who will be an advocate, and you're sort of a ambassador to the rest of the world for your games. It's an amazing thing to have. We had that kind of thing working on Ars Magica at Atlas Games. There's probably like 100 mega hardcore Ars Magica GMs out there, and lots of people who have done it and tried it, and maybe once or twice a campaign. But we found that hardcore group, and we kind of like took care of them for years by making them part of the process of playtesting, making them, sending them things, having them, go to conventions and run games. And they just like, they know more about that game than even we did. And I came in late to the whole process, but there was a 5th edition and I was working on it. It's really cool to have them, but you have to also then weigh that up with, this is not my new fresh face group of people. So if I send playtest to them, they're going to be like instantly going, all right, well, 90% of this is not for me. This 10% of rules changes to these 3 small things in the game. Oh, I have many opinions about that. And here's 6 pages of it, that stops being the kind of stuff. But it was an existing game. It didn't matter. We didn't want those new people necessarily. But I think if you want to grow the audience, you have to have those people who are willing to step in to your shoes and walk out there and do it for you, which I think is going to be a real cool thing. I was going to say too, David, the people who are the 80%, they're also the people who make a character and run it in the game as an NPC, and you realize this person just wants to play. He wants to play his character. You know, I hate GM PCs. I think they're terrible and the bane of the universe, because if you're running the game, you should not favor your little special, precious Mary Sue character. But I can see why people make them, because there's only so much time in the world and only so much games to play, so they'll throw in their little insert NPC and make them interesting.
I wonder if there's much to be gained thinking about that as like a different demographic. So sort of making some design considerations for people who want to go out there and GM, and then a different set of design considerations for people who want to go and have someone else GM for them, but frankly can't.
There's also like certain play styles, like the sort of the GM rotation thing, which I think some games have tried out. I always find that fascinating. Like, also want to know who is the person who buys an RPG and has their mate run it for them, because that's clearly some people out there, right?
Yeah.
You know,
I have no idea who that is.
I don't know.
I mean,
how do they do that? Tell me.
I don't know.
I need that secret.
I've got a guy in one of my groups up here in Auckland who's like, he's got a bunch of games and he'll back every Kickstarter, and the thing will come in. He says, I haven't read the GM section or anything of the adventures, but we would think, Cam, maybe you could run this for us. I'm like, what did you back it for? Oh, I just thought it looked really cool and fun. It would be a cool game to play. And like, okay, that's cool. You know, we'll give it a go. But that's like an amazing gift for people as a publisher. It's like, oh, I want you to buy my game and then make their buddy run it for them, because that's 2 people already who are going to suddenly play this game, instead of the GM who buys a game saying, this is great, I want everyone to please play, and no one does because they'd rather do 5e. You know, so that's fun. I don't know.
That's the shake the bones, right? That's like, even if you don't want to run this, you love it so much that you're desperate to find someone to run it for you.
Yeah.
I think
I want to play this game. I don't want to run it. I want to play it. It sounds cool to play, you know.
Yeah.
It looks like it sucks to run, but I want to play it, you know.
Okay. Hopefully it doesn't suck to run too.
Sometimes it's like that.
Sometimes it's like that. I've got a question, unless you have one ready to Vex to move us to another topic.
Nah, let's hear your one.
So I'm teasing out what this question is, but the boundary I'm interested in exploring with it is how much in a playtest. This is really more broadly about design than playtesting specifically. But when you're going into a playtest, sometimes with game design, it's easy to make things that you're like, oh, I really like this thing, so I'm going to make the game kind of all about this. But then the goal for the project is more around making something that like people that aren't just you can enjoy, right? So like there is a balance to be struck there around like catering to an audience, hopefully your audience, but an audience versus an audience of one, like you the designer, or an audience of a few if it's a team of designers, right? So I guess like to pull that back to playtesting specifically, is playtesting a good way to identify those moments where you're like, oh, maybe I was building for me there and I needed to do that, or if I didn't need to do that so much?
It's an interesting thing to look at, because I think we may want to be honest with ourselves. Often if we're designers, we are designing the game we want to play, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's been my approach for all the stuff I've done before. Like, you know, I designed the Marvel RPG game that I want to run if I was going to be running it. I didn't want to design the one that for someone else to enjoy and have a good time with it. I think it was no good. When I worked on Firefly, I actually specifically said I don't want to write this book. I'm not a fan of the show. You would absolutely tell me writing it that I wasn't into it. I'll design some sort of mechanical stuff and hand it over to someone who will be a huge passionate fan and love this thing and make it, but I don't want to write this book. And I think that's true. If you decide I'm going to make a game about this thing that isn't even my thing that you care about, then it's going to come out in the rules. It's going to come out in the text. People will get that sense. So you kind of have to write for the thing you like, right? At least on some level. If you don't have any interest in the things you're making, if the rules it's kind of you don't really get them and don't like them, then maybe you shouldn't use those rules, right? I guess it doesn't matter if you know there's like a if someone said there are 9,000 people who like this game with tarot cards and 10 people who like this other game, which game do you want to design for if you specifically hate tarot cards? Well, then you could say, I guess I should market tells me I should make the 9,000. No, make the one for 10. You don't belong making the game for those other people because they won't play it anyway and they'll know. So that's my kind of my mindset on that.
Yeah, I also feel rather similarly that this is the sort of thing that you want to address during design rather than during playtesting. I think you should have like a very solid sense of why you're doing what you're doing. And that's not to say like, oh, I'm gonna try and make this game that is supernatural, the RPG, and I'm gonna market it to these people and stuff like that. It's more like know what you want to get out of the experience of making this game. Like both the experience of actually doing it and the product that you have at the end. Like if you just want to enjoy making a game, you can do that and not even worry about what the product comes out as. Supernatural, the RPG. Yeah, of course. It seems like the most obvious example of IP someone would make an RPG of.
Yeah. I think it goes with the idea also of it's maybe the wrong way into this sort of career of saying I want to make a game because I hear they make tons of money doing this.
I mean, yeah that's just
that's also not true, right? But it's almost like saying I'm going to go to school to learn how to become a doctor because doctors make the most money. If you can't stand the sight of blood or don't like people and patients drive you crazy, you have no rapport and you have no interest in biology, then don't do that. I mean, it's that all the things exist for you to not do the thing. Your motivation to do it is just, capitalism. On some of I get it. I mean, people often take jobs to make money, but even if they don't like them. But this is not the kind of thing I think we're talking about. We're talking about design and putting yourself into it and sort of expressing yourself through RPGs and publishing and trying it out. Don't make the game you don't like, because you also can't handle the playtest feedback because you won't know what people are talking about, right?
Yeah. I think also like sometimes people, especially in the indie scene, they'll make a game specifically because they want to play a particular game, right? And that's similar with the GMing thing. But like often if your goal is to have a game that is this thing you have in your head that you want to play, usually that doesn't mean that you need to make a game. Like very often you don't actually care enough about the systems to be like, oh, I'm going to make this very cool system for this that diegetically works with the setting and stuff. And if that's the case, if you don't actually care that much about that, then you actually should be running it in a different system. And people often complete games before they work that out.
Yeah, that's actually wild. I haven't, which is good. I thought
I do think that can be a challenge when you have ideas for a project, and it's impossible to know everything that's out there. You can have like a good, spattering, a good understanding of kind of the broad landscape, but there's again, team that speaking to that, like we're in this position of plenty now. Like there's so many games out there of so many different kinds and so many different approaches, and sometimes so I've had this idea kicking around for a little while about this like Seven Samurai-esque wizard game. I don't know how to explain. It's not one that's refined enough to give you a good explanation for the idea, but it needs to be like episodic in this way. You need to like collect spells over time, and it needs to like there needs to be like rival folks and all sorts of stuff. And like I've been looking for a system to play it and then just like homebrew everything else, because that would be easier than coming up with a game. And the slow realization I'm having is I haven't found anything yet that like really suits what I'm looking for, and I might just have to make a game about it. And that is like a, to your point, Vex, it's like, oh well, should I actually do this or is this just not an idea worth pursuing?
I might know of a system that's in development that might be hackable in a way that would suit that.
Tell me more after this stream. We'll follow up.
I made a joke once. I went to see the D&D movie, the one with Chris Pine and all the other people, which I thought was a really fun movie. And afterwards, I joked on social media. I said, "I'm really looking forward to the D&D movie RPG and how it handles all that stuff that we saw, because that wasn't the D&D, it was something else." And that's a fun thing, because it's like the game of whispers where you say, okay, and then finally like this is the D&D movie. Like, well, great. It's very good, but it wasn't. You haven't made that, right?
So I avoid all D&D stuff basically, and I was just not interested in that. And everyone kept telling me this D&D movie was so good, and eventually somehow I found out who the director is as the director who did Game Night, which is an exceptional movie and just has such a good sense of humor. And I'm like, that makes so much more sense now. This is about the director, not the content of the movie.
It's actors, it's the thing. A lot of it's very tongue-in-cheek. It's also funny, and it's a little bit like how you can kind of, there are superhero movies, and then there's James Gunn superhero movies, which is a whole subcategory, and it ultimately doesn't matter which company he's making them for, they'll be his movies. And I think Edgar Wright's the same way, right? Any movie that Edgar Wright makes is an Edgar Wright movie, regardless of who he's doing it for. There's, I think, a little bit of that in design, and I think people sort of owe it to themselves to be upfront about their specific style and kind of focus on designing these games, because when they can, give them to people to playtest, communicating that is a good thing. If you say this is a Vex game and the Vex game is like this, they won't go, well, we think maybe it would be better if it was D&D. That you say no. Absolutely not. I've said so in this particular thing here. This is a Vex game. But also that's part of that sort of expectation setting, this sort of communicating the whole vibe of this game is something that I like, and it's this. Do you not like that? If so, maybe playtesting it won't give you the kind of experience I'm going for.
Something that's great about that, this is a thing I found out today, is sometimes someone they don't know the touchstones that you're working with, right? But because they're interested in the game, they will be like, hey, here's what I know that is the closest thing to what I think the touchstone is. And today I was informed about a Japanese game show called Kaso, which is sort of like Ninja Warrior, but skateboarding. It's sick as hell. I watched an episode earlier. It was so cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. I described a thing. I think I'm working on a game right now, and someone said that sounds like it's got shades of Gideon the Ninth, and I'm like, that's a book series that I've got on my shelf. I haven't read yet, but I always want to read it. I'm like, oh, really? Is that what it's like? And they're like, yeah. I mean, you should read it. I'm like, I will. but it's odd because it helps you a lot by sort of saying the thing I'm trying to communicate is X, and someone says that sounds like this. If you then go ahead and check that out and you realize it works and it's true, you can put that into your game as a sort of touchstone reference to yourself. You can say it's like this thing. It does make it easier to try and communicate the game's purpose to other people if you have more inspo out there that they can recognize it from.
Yeah, with Death March to the Breach, that game, it's got the whole military and mecha thing to it, so it's very. There's so many mecha touchstones you can throw at people that they'll recognize, and very few of them are what Death March to the Breach is. But then it's almost exactly what 86 is. And if I say 86 to people, they're like, "You're just saying a number. What does that mean?"
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because it would make it so much easier to get people to understand the sort of tone I'm setting for the game.
It's another one people referenced to me. They said you should check out 86.
Oh, really?
Is that one you watched? Is that anime you watched before the series?
Yeah.
Okay, is it good? Great.
Yeah, it's quite a good show. It's got a lot of character depth of all the main characters, and it's got a lot of like questionable sort of analog towards World War II oppression stuff.
Yeah.
So it puts you in a weird mood when you watch it, but if you pull that aside, it is very good.
Now, is that the
And
kind of mood
also
you want the
has-
game to have? Is that why it works so well? Is it kind of it?
Oh yeah, Death March to the Breach is about being in a group of people who are like it presents it as you are cool mech pilots, right? The thing that every mech game does. You jump in because you want to be the cool mech pilot. But as you play the game, you find out that unfortunately you are cool mech pilots because you are sort of like browbeated into joining the military of this empire that probably isn't actually your original land. You've just been like subsumed into it, and actually the reason why you're going to the breach is to commit a huge war crime. And then the game ends before you can actually determine whether or not your character would commit the war crime. You're not allowed to discuss that afterwards. And that's just because that was from the game jam we had about journeys. I thought that was a very interesting topic to like make this tense and uncomfortable journey that just ends without a resolution.
One thing I think is cool to sort of talk about is that there are some games that you don't need to play test because you're not really that committed towards some sort of commercial success thing. And I think some games, especially the game jam things, if you make it and you try it out and you let people play it, they can take it or leave it, and you've made a thing which to you solved a specific need or an urge to sort of write or design something. I think it's useful to be able to say, of these 5 things I did that with, this one is worthy of me trying to make a bigger thing out of it. But I love people who do one-page games. Like Grant Hewitt has done all the things, like Honey Heist and many other games. He's made so many of these things. And there's a Kiwi publisher, spacing on who they are. They make these little zine-sized games and sell them at conventions too here. And there's there are 9 RPGs in this book. You're like, okay, where are they? Oh, this one. Do they playtest them? I don't think so. Right? They may have run them a lot.
Surely not all 9 of them, right?
No. And on some level, I'm like, that's okay. Where do you think, like David, where do you think it will be the cutoff point when you realize, okay, I've made a thing, it's a game. Do I care if it's play tested? What to you would be this sort of signal?
Oh, I think you mentioned that one of the thresholds for that is commercial, right? If you're trying to make something that's commercially successful, then obviously testing it more and more scenarios so you can really judge if it achieves what you set out to that you think is going to be commercially viable, then like that's like one opportunity that you want to answer with playtesting. I think putting that aside for a moment, if you're like, I have these ideas I've written all of them down. I have something in place that I think accomplishes them. Judging just purely from that standpoint, like where do we begin determining which one of these, or if I can only do 1 of 10, like which one do I pick and why? I think from my perspective, if I'm especially like all of my playtesting begins with me. Like I don't hand something to someone else. For some of these one pagers, you probably could hand to someone else. But if I'm under the assumption that like playtesting begins with me, then for me it's the one that I want to run the most. And like that's also like an answer in and of itself, right? Like, oh, I have 10 options and this is the one I would pick. Oh, maybe that's the one that's like the best one. Like I wrote all these options and I picked this one out of these options. So like it's weird to say that there's no bias when you're the one who made all of them, but like they're all equally by me. Like I have no reason to prefer them for the author, right? I've not got no love for the author in this scenario. But like I'll pick the one that I'm most interested in, and that's like an answer in and of itself. I think that's probably how I'd approach it. Of course, it could be that none of them are worth like investing the time and energy of playtesting, but like at that point, like what's worth, right? Like what value are you trying to get out of the playtesting? Is it like if you think the game is, the threshold is the game worth improving? Like there's lots of things in my life that I build that like the first version is good enough. For our house, I couldn't do a cable run for some of the internet for a stretch. I ended up solving it with like point-to-point radios, and how I mounted one of them is like the most bad way to do it, but it took me 5 seconds, and I know that it's like good enough and will last for ages. Does it have to be like right? Does it have to be like super correct when like it works? Look, we're all functioning off my internet right now. This is all doing a dream, right? Does it matter that it's 2 screws and a piece of wood that I cut in 5 seconds? No.
I guess that's also maybe a good point. Like, how much do you need to playtest until you think you're done doing it? Because you could playtest for years until it's some precious, perfect little thing. But if it works, can you just stop there? Right? That's not the whole thing. I mean, parts of it maybe you have to try. But that's because 2 pieces.
It's kind of still the is the game worth improving question. Except like maybe if you constantly answer that question yes, you might have to rethink why you're answering that question yes, or maybe think that it in fact needs so much improving that therefore you shouldn't have even bothered in the first place.
Why did I decide to make the One Piece RPG fully encapsulating the entire series of the show?
That actually one of the adaptations that we've got kicking around is actually a One Piece one, because I think that Oda has very specific story loops that would function really nicely as gameplay loops, and I haven't seen anyone distill the right stuff out of any shonen series, but especially One Piece, to satisfy what I would want out of a game. Because like the most incredible thing to me is like, yes, of course, the setting, and there's so many good things in the setting and the characters and like the way that everybody's unique and everything. But also like I think Oda is a very phenomenal storyteller, and those story factors can be distilled out, I think, to something playable as a game. And
I was thinking, I'm looking forward to the game where we've played every week for 7.5 or so months, and we still haven't finished this one fight with the big bad boss because it's still going on, which is my experience of this show, watching my daughter watch it. I'm like, are they still fighting that big guy with the horns? How many episodes is this? Okay, 50? Okay, all right, cool. That would not work as an RPG
loop. and that's what I think maybe some people extract, if that makes sense. Like some people they swing for the wrong pieces. But that's
I have a friend who's doing design stuff, and he keeps talking about how he wants to do various shonen type things, and I get the feeling that he is interested in, you know, the wrong things to take away from shonen stories.
But I think that comes back to you're going to have an audience who loves what you do, and you're going to have an audience that hates what you do potentially. And for people who want like really crunchy, I want Kaido with his big ass HP bars and multiple, you know, boss stages, and I want to emulate that in like the most dice rolly, moment by moment, you know, way. Or do you go completely narrative structural? And it's like, no, I know that these things need to happen in roughly this order. And the joy is more like how do things resolve along the way. And the audiences that love those games are often very different audiences, right?
Yes, and they will balk at either one of those two outcomes too, right?
Yes.
If you can't give them that feeling of like, I'm going to pick up 70 dice in my hand and throw them all at once, and that's just round 9, you know, if that group basically is thirsty for that kind of RPG experience, the other version will not help them at all.
If you love Shadowrun heists, you will probably hate my heist game.
Yes.
And like, that's fine.
Like, is there 2 hours of shopping before the game starts? Is that how that? God. Yep. No slight to Shadowrun people. I love the.
No, it's a great game.
But it's like
very specific idea.
Why do you spend so much time shopping around for stuff that may not ever get used in the end? And then you go on the job and then you scrap the plan and it doesn't matter.
Yep.
It's a great game that there's too much of.
A little bit. I think that's something of a player culture that we see develop when games are out there for long enough. You start having people do things a certain way as almost like it's the given. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we had that kind of time to test that out and find out what that play culture is going to be before we release it?
Yeah. But I guess how many playtests do you need under your belt to figure out a play culture?
I don't know. Yep. That's a good question.
That's a question I don't like.
Yeah. And if the way you're assessing that is mostly based on like you running the game, for instance, which is both my strength and my Achilles heel is I just love to run it. Anything. Are you figuring out the play culture of the game you're running? Are you figuring out the play culture that you engender as a GM or keeper?
It's you. It's for sure you. Another aspect of this thing too with culture or sort of like, you know, emergent sort of play stuff, I think is very helpful to see over some time. If you find that there's a thing in your game that everyone does all the time because it feels like it's the most efficient, successful, useful, best way of doing it, most, you know, optimized thing, that's a thing to flag, I think, no matter what your design is, unless you want it to work that way, right? If you want people to do A, B, C, and D in that order, and you've emphasized it and incentivized it, then cool, you've success. But if you've made it and people say, we've all made characters, and all of us took that one power that's in there because it was cheapest of all of them and it gives us the most bonus. And you say that doesn't make any story reason why. Well, it was there. It's actively hurting us not to do this, right? That's a sign that something's wrong with your system, and I think that you won't find that out until people try out a little bit more of that. So that's the beginning of culture, right?
Cam, I need you to shout that at so many video game designers. Just need you to shout it at them until they get it. It's
the longsword rule. It's the longsword rule. There's nothing better than a longsword.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's
need a lot
tougher
of
to build that
shouted
into tabletop games, but it certainly happens.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yep.
We're coming up on time, so I think we might stop there. Do you want to maybe just cover this last question I've got? What are the best small bites of advice you can give to designers planning a playtest?
Okay. You want to go first, David?
Oh, mean to me. I mean, I did just run some stuff, so I'll lean on this. Will be recent advice. So one, I touched base on this earlier, but if you can secure advice immediately after a playtest, do that. That is often the richest advice. There's some stuff you can learn from more longitudinal like results in play, but like if you can get their brain fresh after they've done it, you're going to have some useful insights, hopefully. So that's like the first one. So like plan the schedule around that, because you're going to tell them if you're running it, or even if they're having running it for someone else. Like, hey, don't just let them go. Like, say, yeah, we're gonna block off 4 hours for this game, and then finish it in 3, and then spend an hour talking about the game.
Yeah.
But they've already blocked it off in their schedule, right? So like be clear about that with people up front. I think that's one of the most useful things. Another like easy to implement tidbit is like sitting back and thinking thoroughly about what you think the game is struggling with. And we've talked about this a lot already, where like some things, if it's just math's problem, make your spreadsheet, solve it that way.
Yeah.
But if there is some social aspect that you cannot solve in your own head or solve in pen and paper that requires people to be at the table, then identify as much as you can what some of those issues are going into it. If you're like really early on, your playtesting might be completely exploratory, where it's just like, I think this works. I don't even know necessarily what might be wrong with it yet. Let's run it a few times and like get some of that information back, and then just kind of work off of that. But like if you can identify anything on your own, do that beforehand, and then go into the playtest armed with that information.
I want to add something to the advice to secure advice immediately after the test. This is something that I found out. Once you get your advice, you should act on it immediately after as well. It's way easier to improve things immediately after a playtest.
Or make really detailed notes for yourself. This happened to me in between version 0.5 and 0.6, which I just ran. I had really good feedback from the last. I did like 2 or 3 playtests in a row. I got great feedback. I had it all in my head really good. And then I didn't write about it. And I forgot to write down like detailed notes to myself of like the changes I was thinking of implementing. Mm-hmm. And so I had to spend like an entire afternoon where I just like went back on the snippets of what I did note down and like tried to jog my memory of like, okay, no, this was one of the issues I needed to work on. And like, this is one of the things. And like, just kind of like recaching that all in the brain takes like effort. So like, don't make yourself do that. Take care of it while it's all still in there,
I have a couple of things that I would say are useful bite-sized bits of advice, and one of them is talking about the whole prep and planning the packet of things that you want to test out. Don't put anything in there that you don't want them to do anything with or care about or use. Don't put the extensive rules for making characters if you aren't going to have them make characters. Don't do any of that stuff. Be very selective about what you want to send them, because it's the stuff you want them to test. It's probably good to have like setting stuff and other kind of contextual stuff in there. That's fine. But if you have a whole subsystem on vehicle creation for your game, don't package that in with it if you aren't expecting to try that out. Right. So that's the first thing. If you don't need to test it, don't put it in there. Unless it would break the game not to have it. Obviously, it doesn't make any sense. Second thing, if you have people testing a game, take their names and figure out if they don't mind being credited or mentioned in your end up thing, and if they don't want to, then by all means say this person was a playtester. It's really cool to have that as a credit, because you feel like you contributed towards a cool thing. If their only feedback was this game sucks, I hate it, don't put them in there, obviously, because that's not helpful. But also they wouldn't get the thing and look for it anyway, so it kind of solves a problem. And the third thing I would say is that related to the idea of not putting things in there, don't ask them the questions that you don't want to get an answer from. Like, don't ask questions of the playtester or have a thing you want them to test if you don't want any. If you won't accept feedback on that thing. So if someone says, "Here's a game about the fairy swashbucklers. How do you feel about fairies?" If they say we hate them, then you're like, well, crap. Now I got to change my whole game. Don't ask that question. So if you don't want to hear the answer or don't want to interrogate this thing or even look at it, don't put it down in your list of things to be get feedback for. So
that's really great advice, and I'm incredibly excited and awaiting your next swashbuckling fairy game, Sam.
I keep mentioning it, and now I have to do it. So
yeah. Give us a one-pager on it. I'll run it.
Well, I'm not a one-page GM person.
Yeah,
Oh,
every
give
time
me
you
a
say
30-pager on it. I don't care. Give me a short one. Give me a short one. Give me a long one too. But I don't know if you. So.
You're
Every
my
time you say
sole
that,
audience for the various Boschbot tournaments.
I feel like it's a Sam Robson game, so maybe you could do a collaboration.
I'll get Sam to write the whole thing, and then we'll just play it next time we meet.
There we are.
All right, take us out, Vix.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. I just want to give a thanks to Dave and Sarah on tech. This Dave right here. And I'm going to actually throw it back to you both one more time so that you can do plugs for anything you want to plug.
Cool.
I don't know. Whenever I publish All According to Plan, grab a copy and play it. And if
It's
you're
good, I've
listening
played
now
it.
and you're somebody who I've run a playtest for, congratulations. When it's ready for other people to run the playtest, I'm going to be hounding you to run playtests for me. So just be aware that strategy
We
will
did
be
talk about
implemented
this.
shortly, hopefully.
This is the master plan.
That's right.
I've been Cam Banks. You can find me as Rusty Sellsword or Cam Banks in all places on the internet, but mostly I lurk on Blue Sky, which I have many thoughts and throw things out there because it's better than Twitter. And I occasionally post to the Instagram and so forth. But yeah, here on KiwiRPG, if you are part of the Discord, I'm here too, and I'm happy to answer questions about playtesting further after this. I'm sure most of us are. If you have them, you can drop us a note in there. So there.
Cool. And I've been Vix. You can find my work at hexavixagon.itch.io. Soon, hopefully, I'll put stuff up on RPG Trader as well. And if you want more of my thoughts on playtesting, though specifically very basic stuff, the blog that is on KiwiRPG's blogs that I put out about playtesting is a decent read. It's called Your First Playtest, so you can check that out.
Nice.
And that's us.
Cool. Bye.
Later.